You think giving me a dusty lamp while my brother got the house was the final insult? You think you won. But in this family, I am the only one who keeps the receipts. I have bank transfers from 2019 totaling over $40,000. I did not cry. I just waited for you to sign the papers, walked out to my car, and called the attorney who knows exactly what you were trying to hide. My name is Nora Caldwell. I am 35 years old, and I work as a senior compliance analyst for a firm called Harbor and Lyle Advisory in Phoenix, Arizona. My job description is technical, but the reality of my daily life is quite simple. I study patterns, I look at ledgers that are supposed to be balanced, and I find the one decimal point that suggests they are lying. I track money that people try very hard to hide. I am paid a salary to be suspicious, to be meticulous, and to be entirely immune to emotional pleas. It is a career path that suits me perfectly, because I have been training for it since I was 16 years old. I did not learn these skills in a university lecture hall. I learned them in the living room of my childhood home in Savannah, waiting for a father who never came home on time, and a stepmother who only spoke to me when she needed a check signed. To understand why I am boarding a plane to Georgia tomorrow, you have to understand the ledger of my life. Most families operate on a currency of affection, shared memories, or at least a sense of mutual obligation. The Caldwell family operates on wire transfers. For the last 10 years, I have not been a daughter or a sister. I have been a line of credit that does not charge interest. I sat at my desk this morning in Phoenix, surrounded by the hum of servers and the cool, sterile air of the office. On my dual monitors, I was tracing a complex series of shell company transactions for a client, but my mind was on my own personal audit. I opened the encrypted folder on my personal cloud drive. I labeled it Caldwell years ago. Inside, there is no nostalgia. There are no scanned photographs of birthday parties or family vacations. Instead, there are subfolders labeled by fiscal year. I clicked on the folder from 3 years ago. There was the PDF of a bank transfer for $2,500. The subject line read, Mason Medical Emergency. I remember that day. My half-brother, Mason, had called me in a panic, claiming he had broken his leg and his insurance had lapsed. I sent the money within 10 minutes. 2 days later, I saw a picture on Instagram of Mason on a jet ski in Florida. His legs perfectly intact. I did not scream. I did not call him to yell. I simply took a screenshot of the post, converted it to a PDF, and filed it in the folder next to the bank transfer receipt. I labeled the file Fraudulent Claim, Jet Ski. That is just one entry. There are hundreds. There is the $5,000 I sent my father, Graham, for urgent roof repairs on the family estate. I later found out through a contractor friend that the roof had never been touched, but Graham had purchased a vintage Mustang the following week. There is the tuition assistance for a course Denise, my stepmother, said she wanted to take to better herself. She dropped out after 2 weeks, but the money never came back to me. I have saved everything. Every text message asking for a loan, every email promising repayment by the end of the month, every voicemail where Graham's voice went from charming to cold the moment I asked a clarifying question. I have call logs showing that in the last 5 years, not a single person from that house has called me on my birthday. Not once. The only incoming calls from the 912 area code occur when they need a signature, a cosigner, or a deposit. This is what I mean when I say, I have been absent. It is a systematic absence. I stopped going home for holidays 4 years ago when I realized I was the only one buying gifts. I would ship boxes of thoughtfully chosen presents, expensive skincare for Denise, tech gadgets for Mason, rare books for Dad, and I would never receive a call. I would track the packages online, delivered, signed for by D. Caldwell, and then silence, a silence so loud it rang in my ears. I eventually stopped sending the gifts, but I never stopped keeping the records. It became a compulsion. If they were going to treat me like a wallet, I was going to function like a bank. Banks do not forget. Banks keep archives. Then the envelope arrived. It came on a Tuesday, delivered to my apartment complex in downtown Phoenix. It was thick, cream-colored, and heavy. The return address was embossed in black ink. Grange and Associates, attorneys at law. My father died 3 weeks ago. I found out the same way strangers found out. I have a Google alert set for Graham Caldwell Savannah. It pinged on my phone while I was in a meeting about regulatory compliance. I read the obituary under the table. It described him as a beloved pillar of the community, a devoted husband to Denise, and a proud father to his son. Mason. My name was not in the text. I was not a survivor. I was not a footnote. I was deleted. I did not cry in that meeting. I simply closed the tab and went back to discussing risk assessment. So when the letter from the attorney arrived, I was surprised. If I was not family enough to be notified of the death, why was I family enough to receive legal correspondence? I opened it with a letter opener, slicing through the heavy paper with precision. Dear Ms. Caldwell, you are hereby requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of the late Graham Caldwell. The reading will take place this Friday, October 14th, at 2 p.m, at our offices in Savannah. I stared at the paper, a will reading, in the movies. This is where the family gathers to weep and hold hands. In reality, a will reading is a business transaction. It is the final distribution of assets. And for a man who erased me from his obituary to invite me to the distribution of his assets was highly irregular. I took the letter to work the next day and showed it to Sarah. Sarah is a 60-year-old forensic accountant who has seen more corporate fraud than the SEC. She is the most cynical woman I know, which is why I like her. They want something, Sarah said immediately, tossing the letter back onto my desk. I know, I said, looking at the expensive stationery. I assume they want me to sign a waiver. Maybe Mason needs clear title to the house and they need me to formally renounce any claim. If that was all, they would have mailed you the form and asked for a notary stamp, Sarah said. She took a sip of her black coffee. Dragging you across the country? Making you sit in a room with them? That is theater. Nora, they want an audience, or they want to humiliate you, or, and this is my professional opinion, they need to pin a liability on you. She looked me in the eye. Do not go alone, but since I know you are stubborn and you will go alone, do not go empty-handed. What should I bring? I asked. Everything, Sarah said. Bring the receipts. Bring the logs. Bring the proof that you have supported that house for a decade. If they try to say you abandoned the family, you show them the bank statements. If they try to say you owe them something, you show them the deficit. She was right. I went home that night and I did not pack a black dress for mourning. I did not pack tissues. I opened my laptop and connected it to my high-speed printer. I spent 4 hours compiling the dossier. I printed the spreadsheets in landscape mode so the columns of figures were legible. I organized the documents chronologically. I used color-coded tabs: green for direct cash transfers, yellow for third-party payments, red for legal fees I covered for Mason. I included the emails where Denise claimed the money was a temporary loan. I included the text messages where Dad said, "I will make it right, Nora, I promise." I totaled the numbers. The sum at the bottom of the final page was 6 figures. It was enough to buy a small house. It was enough to start a business. It was a massive amount of capital that had flowed one way, from Phoenix to Savannah, into a black hole of ingratitude. I punched holes in the documents and placed them inside a stiff, black binder. I snapped the rings shut. The sound was satisfying, like the cocking of a weapon. I am not going back to Savannah to beg for their love. I gave up on that when I was 25, and Mason forgot to pick me up from the airport for Christmas, leaving me stranded for 3 hours while he played video games. I am not going to ask for a share of the estate because I feel entitled to their money. I am going because I am a compliance analyst, and I am conducting a final audit. I booked my flight for Thursday evening. It cost me $600, which I paid for myself. Naturally, as I packed my suitcase, I looked at the black binder sitting on my bed. It was heavy. It contained the undeniable truth of who I was to them and who they were to me. My colleague's warning echoed in my head. Do not go empty-handed. I am not empty-handed. I am armed with 15 years of data. They think they are inviting a grieving daughter to a family gathering. They do not realize they have summoned an auditor to a crime scene. I zipped my suitcase shut and turned off the lights in my apartment. I was ready to close this chapter, not with tears, but with the cold, hard ink of the truth. I sat at my kitchen island in Phoenix, the desert heat pressing against the glass of my sliding door, but the temperature inside my veins felt like ice water. I had already packed the physical receipts, the binder that Sarah had advised me to bring. That was the history. That was the defensive documentation. But in my line of work, you do not just look at historical data to understand a risk. You look at the current exposure. You look at the motive. Before I shut down my laptop to pack it, I decided to run one last standard check. It is a habit I developed working in compliance. When a suspicious entity initiates contact, you check your own perimeter. I logged into my credit monitoring service. I usually only check this once a month when the automatic notification comes in, but today I felt a prickle on the back of my neck that urged me to look closer. I scrolled past the green numbers of my credit score, which was excellent, and navigated to the section labeled Inquiries. There were the standard ones: the check from my landlord 2 years ago, the check from the car dealership when I leased my sedan, but at the very top of the list, dated just 4 days ago, there was a new entry. It was listed as a soft inquiry. This meant it did not impact my credit score, and it usually happens when a company wants to pre-approve you for an offer. But I did not recognize the name of the institution. It was not a national bank. It was a regional lender called Chatham Coastal Holdings. I highlighted the name and ran a search. They were a mid-sized commercial lender based in Savannah, Georgia. My heart rate did not increase. Instead, my focus narrowed. Why would a commercial lender in Georgia be looking at the credit history of a compliance analyst in Arizona? I had not applied for a loan. I had not inquired about property. There was only one link between me and Savannah, and that link was currently lying in a morgue or had already been buried. I picked up my phone and called Ben. Ben is an investigator I work with sometimes when our firm needs to look into the background of a potential corporate partner. He has access to databases that go deeper than Google. Ben answered on the second ring. I kept my voice flat and professional. I gave him the name of the lender and asked him to cross-reference it with any entities associated with Graham Caldwell or Mason Caldwell. I waited on the line while Ben typed. The silence stretched for 2 minutes. I could hear the click of his mechanical keyboard. He told me he found a hit. He said that Chatham Coastal Holdings currently held a lien against a commercial property owned by a limited liability company called Southern Marsh Ventures. He asked if I knew the company. I told him I did not. He dug deeper. He pulled the articles of incorporation for Southern Marsh Ventures. The registered agent was Graham Caldwell. The managing member was Mason Caldwell. I asked him to look for judgments or pending litigation. Ben whistled low. He told me that Southern Marsh Ventures was bleeding. He listed 3 separate lawsuits from unpaid contractors filed in the last 6 months. He listed a tax lien from the state of Georgia. And then he told me the most interesting piece of information. He said there was a balloon payment due on the primary commercial mortgage held by Chatham Coastal Holdings. The note was maturing on the 1st of November. I asked him how much the balloon payment was. He said it was $142,000 and some change. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment and opened my banking app. I navigated to my primary savings account, the one I had been building aggressively for 10 years, saving every bonus, every tax refund, living well below my means so that I would never, ever have to ask anyone for help. The balance in my account was $145,000. The numbers were almost identical. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, but it did not hurt. It clarified. This was not a reunion. This was an extraction operation. They had not invited me back to give me a piece of my father's legacy. They had invited me back because their company was about to default. The bank was circling, and they had likely run a skip trace or a credit check to see if the estranged daughter had enough liquidity to bail them out. The soft inquiry was them checking the depth of the well before they tried to drop a bucket down it. They probably thought I would be emotional. They probably thought that grief would make me soft. That if they presented me with a sob story about losing the family business, I would write a check to save the Caldwell name. They had researched my credit, but they had failed to research my character. I closed the banking tab. I opened a new email draft. I attached the PDF of the credit inquiry. I attached the notes from my call with Ben regarding the lawsuits and the looming debt. I attached a scan of my flight itinerary and the invitation from the law firm. I typed a subject line, Case File, Savannah Contingency. I addressed the email to myself, but I also BCC'd my work email and Sarah's personal email in the body. I wrote a simple instruction. I wrote that if I was coerced into signing any document in Georgia, or if any transfers were initiated from my accounts under duress, this folder contained the evidence of premeditated financial entrapment. I hit send. Then I went to my desk drawer and took out a USB drive. I encrypted it with a 256-bit key. I dragged every single folder onto it. The years of bank transfers, the ignored emails, the public records Ben had just found. I put the USB drive on my keychain, next to my house key. I was not done. I took a fresh legal pad and a pen. I sat down to write a script. I knew that in the lawyer's office, emotions would be used as weapons. They would try to make me feel guilty. They would talk about family obligation. The only way to survive that is to not engage with the narrative, but to interrogate the process. I wrote down my questions. Question 1. Who is the executor of the estate, and have they posted bond? Question 2. Is there a complete and verified inventory of all assets and liabilities, and has it been filed with the probate court? Question 3. Are there any outstanding debts against the estate that exceed the liquid assets? Question 4. Why was I summoned for a reading in person when a copy of the will could have been mailed? I memorized the list. I visualized the room. I pictured Mason, likely wearing a suit that cost more than his car, looking at me with those wide, deceptive eyes. I pictured Denise, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. I pictured the lawyer, Elliot Grange, sitting behind a mahogany desk. I made a vow to myself right then. I would be a ghost in that room. A ghost does not have feelings. A ghost cannot be guilt-tripped. A ghost only observes. They wanted me to react like a desperate daughter seeking validation. I would react like a forensic auditor conducting a hostile interview. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and finished packing. The flight to Savannah was uneventful, but the landing was rough. We descended into a wall of gray turbulence. When I stepped out of the airport terminal, the air was thick enough to chew. It was raining. Not the cleansing, hard rain of the desert, but the relentless, soaking drizzle of the south. The humidity instantly clung to my skin and frizzed my hair. I picked up my rental car, a nondescript silver sedan. I did not drive to the family estate. I checked into a hotel downtown, one of those chain hotels that look exactly the same in every city. I needed neutral ground. As I drove through the wet streets, the Spanish moss hanging from the live oaks looked like tattered rags in the headlights. The city felt beautiful and rotting, a place where secrets were buried under layers of polite conversation and humidity. I arrived at the hotel and carried my bag inside. The folder was in my briefcase. The USB was in my pocket. The knowledge of the $142,000 debt was in my mind. I felt a strange sensation as I rode the elevator to the 4th floor. It was the feeling of walking onto a stage after the other actors had already rehearsed their lines. They knew where they wanted this scene to go. They knew the ending they had written for me. I was the lamb brought in for the slaughter, the wallet brought in to patch the hole in the sinking ship. But they had forgotten one thing. You do not bring a lamb to a slaughter if the lamb knows how to use a knife. And in my world, the sharpest knife is a question that reveals a lie. I unlocked my hotel room door and stepped into the cool, air-conditioned dark. I was ready for the reading. I was ready to see exactly how low they were willing to go. The offices of Grange and Associates were located in a restored antebellum mansion on Bull Street, the kind of building that projected a silent, intimidating authority. The air inside was chilled to a precise 68 degrees and smelled of lemon polish and old leather bindings. It was a smell designed to make you feel small, to remind you that the law was ancient and you were just a temporary inconvenience. I checked in with the receptionist, a young woman who looked at my attire, a sharp, charcoal blazer and tailored trousers, with a hint of confusion. I did not look like a grieving daughter. I looked like I was there to serve a subpoena. "They are waiting for you in the conference room, Ms. Caldwell," she said, her voice dropping to a respectful whisper. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. I carried only my purse and the black binder Sarah had helped me assemble. I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket against my hip. When I opened the double doors, the conversation inside died instantly. The room was dominated by a long mahogany table that shone like a dark mirror. At the head sat Elliot Grange. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair combed back perfectly and a suit that cost more than my first car. He had the kind of face that was professionally sympathetic, the eyes watchful and hard. To his right sat my stepmother, Denise. She was wearing black, of course, a dress that was tastefully modest but cut to show off the pearl necklace at her throat. She held a handkerchief in one hand, though her eyes were dry. Next to her was Mason. My half-brother looked older than the last time I had seen him on a social media post. His face was fuller, slightly flushed, and he was tapping a gold pen against the table with a nervous, irregular rhythm. "Nora," Denise said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing to a casual observer. "We were not sure you would come." "I received a legal summons," I said, taking the seat at the opposite end of the table. I did not smile. "I generally respond to those." "It was an invitation, not a summons," Elliot Grange said smoothly. His voice was like molasses, slow and coating everything in a layer of sticky sweetness. "We wanted to handle this as a family. Please, get comfortable." I placed my binder on the table. The sound of the hard cover hitting the wood was louder than I intended. Mason stopped tapping his pen and stared at it. "Let us begin," Elliot said, opening a thick file in front of him. "I want to express my deepest condolences to all of you. Graham was a good man and a prudent planner. He wanted to ensure that his family was taken care of." I almost laughed. Prudent planner. Graham Caldwell was a man who bought boats when he owed taxes, but I kept my face blank. Elliot began to read. The preamble was standard legal boilerplate, establishing the validity of the document and the revocation of all prior wills. I listened intently, listening for dates. This will was dated only 8 months ago. That confirmed my suspicion. The will had been changed recently, likely after his diagnosis, likely when he was heavily medicated. Then came the distribution of assets. "To my beloved wife, Denise," Elliot read, "I leave the entirety of my life insurance policy, the contents of the primary checking accounts, and the residue of the personal property not otherwise specified." Denise let out a small, choked sob and dabbed at her nose. I did mental math. The life insurance policy was substantial, provided he had kept up the premiums. "To my son, Mason," Elliot continued, and Mason sat up straighter, puffing out his chest. "I leave the family estate located at 412 Abercorn Street, including the land and all structures thereon, as well as the controlling interest in Southern Marsh Ventures, with the hope that he will continue the family legacy." Mason exhaled a breath he had been holding. He looked at me, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had won. In his mind, this was the victory lap. He got the house, he got the company, he was the lord of the manor. I knew something he did not. He had just inherited a house that likely had liens against it, and a company that was $142,000 in debt to a predatory lender. He had inherited a sinking ship, and he was looking at me like he was the captain of an aircraft carrier. "And finally," Elliot said, his eyes flickering briefly to me before returning to the paper, "to my daughter, Nora." The room went silent. Even Denise stopped her performance to listen. "I leave my vintage banker's desk lamp, the one that sat on my study desk for 30 years. Nora always valued illumination and hard work, and I hope this serves her well in her career." Elliot closed the folder. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I waited for the rest of the sentence. I waited for a trust fund, a bond, a piece of jewelry, anything. But Elliot simply folded his hands on top of the file and looked at me with an expression of practiced pity. "Is that it?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my stomach turned over. "That is the entirety of the specific bequests," Elliot said. He reached under the table and produced a cardboard box. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. Inside was a heavy brass lamp with a green glass shade. It was old. The brass was tarnished. The cord was frayed. It was the lamp my father had used to sign checks he could not cash. It was a piece of junk. Denise sighed. "Oh, he loved that lamp. Nora, he spent so many nights under its light. It is a very sentimental gesture." "It is a lamp," I said flatly. Mason leaned forward. The smirk was fully visible now. He looked at the house keys that Elliot had placed in front of him. Then he looked at my box. He lowered his voice, but in the quiet room, it carried perfectly. "You always liked paperwork. Nora," he said, "this lamp fits you. Maybe you can use it to check my spelling when I send you holiday cards from the house." He thought he was being clever. He thought he was twisting the knife, but the insult washed over me because my brain was already processing the anomaly. My father was a narcissist, but he was not subtle. If he wanted to insult me, he would have left me $1. He would have left me a letter detailing my failures, leaving me a lamp, a specific, heavy, physical object, and phrasing it as something I would value for illumination. My father knew I was an auditor. He knew I looked for things that were hidden. "I see," I said. I did not reach for the box. Instead, I opened my black binder. "Mr. Grange, before we conclude, I have a few requests." Elliot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Requests?" "Yes, I would like to see the full written will, including all codicils and appendices. I would also like a complete inventory of the estate's assets and liabilities as filed with the probate court. And I want to see the engagement letter regarding your representation of the estate, specifically the date it was signed." The air in the room shifted. Denise froze. Mason looked confused, his brow furrowing. "Nora," Denise said sharply, dropping the grieving widow act for a split second, "there is no need for this. We are family." "I am an heir," I corrected her, "and I am asking for standard documentation." Elliot smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Caldwell, that is not necessary. The will has been read. The distribution is clear. We can provide you with a summary in due time, but legal documents take time to process. There is no need to burden you with paperwork today." "Not necessary." That was the phrase. That was the tell. In my profession, when a CFO tells me that seeing the raw data is not necessary, it means there is fraud. When a manager tells me that checking the logs is not necessary, it means they are hiding incompetence. And when a lawyer tells a beneficiary that seeing the will is not necessary, it means the will is vulnerable. If everything was above board, he would have handed me a copy the moment I walked in. He would have buried me in paper to prove how legitimate it all was. By refusing, he was trying to control the information flow. He was hiding something, and he was arrogant enough to think that because I only got a lamp, I would walk away feeling too humiliated to fight. I stood up. I reached out and pulled the cardboard box toward me. The lamp was heavier than it looked. Much heavier. "Fine," I said. "I will take my inheritance." Mason chuckled. "Don't trip on the cord on your way out." I looked at him. I looked at the man who was celebrating the acquisition of a debt trap. "Enjoy the house, Mason. Make sure you check the foundation. Cracks have a way of spreading when you ignore them." I looked at Denise. "And Denise, you might want to check the beneficiary status on that life insurance. Insurance companies are very particular about dates." I turned to Elliot. "I will be in touch. Mr. Grange." "We consider this matter closed. Ms. Caldwell," Elliot said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a warning. "You can consider it whatever you like," I said. "But until I see the documents, nothing is closed." I walked out of the room. I carried the box in both arms. It felt awkward and clunky. I walked past the receptionist, out the heavy front door, and into the humid Savannah afternoon. The rain had picked up. It plastered my hair to my forehead instantly. I walked to my rental car and unlocked the back seat. I placed the box carefully on the upholstery. I stood there for a moment in the rain, staring at the brass base of the lamp through the window. Why this lamp? My father was a man who hid money. He hid affairs. He hid his true nature. He never gave anything away for free, and he certainly never gave anything away for sentiment. Mason thought the lamp was a joke. Denise thought it was a prop to keep me quiet. But as I wiped the rain from my face and got into the driver's seat, a cold, sharp realization settled in my chest. You do not leave a forensic analyst a lamp unless you want them to find something in the dark. I started the car. I was not going to the airport. I was going back to my hotel. I had a lamp to dismantle, and I had a lawyer to call. Not Elliot Grange, but someone who actually followed the law. The hotel room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning unit and the sound of the rain still drumming against the window pane. I had placed the lamp on the generic wooden desk, clearing away the room service menu and the ice bucket to make space for it. Under the fluorescent light of the hotel room, the lamp looked even more pathetic than it had in the lawyer's office. The brass was dull, spotted with age, and the green glass shade had a hairline fracture running down the back. It was an ugly object. It was the kind of thing you would find at a garage sale for $5. But as I stood there looking at it, my auditor's brain refused to accept the surface-level data. My father, Graham Caldwell, was a man who appreciated aesthetics. He wore tailored suits. He drove imported cars. He filled his house with mahogany and leather. He did not keep junk. If he had kept this lamp on his desk for 30 years, as Denise had claimed, it was not because he liked the way it looked. I reached out and gripped the stem of the lamp. I lifted it. It was heavy, not just solid brass heavy, but unnaturally dense. The center of gravity was off. It felt bottom-heavy, as if the base was filled with lead. I set it back down and turned it over. The bottom was covered in a circle of green felt, the kind used to prevent scratches on furniture. The felt was worn around the edges, peeling slightly. I ran my thumb along the rim. The glue was tacky, but not dry. That was the first red flag. Glue on a 30-year-old lamp should be brittle. It should flake off. If the glue was tacky, someone had reapplied the felt recently. I took a nail file from my toiletry kit and wedged it under the edge of the felt. I worked it around the circumference, peeling back the green fabric. It came away with a ripping sound, revealing the metal plate underneath. There were 4 screws holding the base plate in place. The heads of the screws were stripped, the metal shiny and jagged. Someone had opened this recently, and they had been in a hurry. I used the tip of the nail file to painstakingly turn the screws. It took me 20 minutes to get them loose enough to remove with my fingers. My hands were steady. I was not trembling with anticipation. I was vibrating with focus. This was forensic work. This was no different than unearthing a buried line item in a quarterly report. I removed the final screw and lifted the metal plate. The base of the lamp was hollow. It was a casting, and inside the brass shell, there was a cavity about the size of a fist. It was empty. I stared into the dark metal space. There was nothing there. No rolls of cash. No diamond rings. No secret will rolled up and tied with a ribbon. It was just a dirty, empty void smelling of oxidized metal. For a second, I felt a surge of cold fury. Had Mason been right? Was this just a joke? Had they given me an empty container just to make me waste my evening looking for a ghost? I tilted the lamp to the side to screw the plate back on, ready to throw the whole thing in the trash. As I tilted it, something fluttered. It was tiny, a scrap of paper, no bigger than a fortune cookie slip, had been jammed into the threading where the screw had been. It was caught in the grease of the screw mechanism. I reached in with my tweezers, another tool from my travel kit, and carefully extracted it. I placed the scrap on the desk and smoothed it out. It was a corner torn from a larger piece of paper, perhaps a yellow legal pad. On it, written in blue ink, were letters and numbers. SDB-19. The rest of the number was torn off. Below the code, there was a signature. It was scrawled, shaky, the lines trailing off at the end, but I recognized the loop of the G and the sharp slash of the C. Graham. It was my father's signature, but it was not his confident, check-signing signature. It was the signature of a man whose hand was trembling, who was writing in the dark, or in secret. SDB. Safety deposit box. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My mind flashed back to when I was 10 years old. My father used to take me to the bank on Bull Street. He would bring me into the vault with him. He told me once, "Nora, paper is the only thing that remembers. People forget. People lie. But a document in a steel box stays the same forever." He had a box. I knew he had a box. But surely, if it was part of the estate, it would have been emptied and inventoried by the executor. Elliot Grange would have listed the contents. Unless Elliot Grange did not know about it, or unless he did know, and he had already sanitized it. I looked at the lamp again. Why put the clue in the lamp? Why not just tell me? Then I remembered the inventory list I had glimpsed on Elliot's desk. I had not been allowed to hold it, but I have a photographic memory for spreadsheets. I closed my eyes and visualized the document upside down. Item 401, vintage desk lamp, valuation, $50. But next to the valuation, there had been a code in the location origin column. Most items were marked RES for residence or OFF for office. The lamp was marked key. At the time, I thought it meant personal key or something similar. Now, looking at the scrap of paper, I realized it was not a description. It was an instruction. The lamp was not the asset. The lamp was the physical key to a location I was supposed to find, but someone had gotten there first. The stripped screws, the empty cavity, the torn paper. Someone had raided the lamp. They had taken whatever was inside, maybe the actual key to the box, maybe the full number. They had torn the paper in their haste, leaving only this fragment behind. Who had access to the lamp? It had been in the house. Mason, Denise. But if they had found the key, why give me the lamp? Why not throw it away? Because they didn't find everything. They found the key. Perhaps. But they didn't know what it opened. Or they found the paper, ripped it out, and didn't realize they left a piece behind. Or maybe, just maybe, my father had rigged it. Maybe he knew they would look. So he hid the real information in the one place they wouldn't check closely, the threading of a screw. I needed to know where SDB 19 was located. Savannah had dozens of banks, but the number 19 suggested an old box, a very old box. Modern boxes had longer, digital-friendly serial numbers. Box 19 would be from a bank that had been around for 50 years or more. There was only one bank my father trusted, the First City Merchants Bank on Broughton Street. It was where he took me as a child. I looked at the clock. It was 4:45 in the afternoon. The bank would be closing in 15 minutes. I grabbed my phone and dialed the local branch number. "First City Merchants, how may I direct your call?" A woman's voice answered. "Hello," I said, putting on my most authoritative, efficient voice. "My name is Nora Caldwell. I am inquiring about the protocol for accessing a safety deposit box belonging to a deceased relative. I am sorry for your loss, ma'am," the teller said. "To access a box, we would need the executor of the estate to be present, along with the death certificate and the letters testamentary issued by the probate court." "I understand," I said. "And if I am a beneficiary named in the will, but not the executor?" "You would not be granted access without the executor's permission, ma'am. Security is very strict." "I see. Could you at least confirm if a Graham Caldwell holds a box at your branch? I have reason to believe the key was left to me." There was a pause. "I cannot give out specific client information over the phone." "I have the box number," I lied. "It is box number 19. The silence on the other end stretched out. It was the kind of silence that happens when you hit a nerve. "Box 19, the woman repeated. Her tone had changed. It was no longer the generic customer service voice. It was cautious. "Yes, box 19. One moment, please. She put me on hold. I paced the small hotel room. The rain slashed against the glass. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. When the line clicked back open, it was not the teller. It was a man. Ms. Caldwell? This is Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. Mr. Henderson, I said. I am just trying to clarify the status of my father's box. Yes, well, he sounded nervous. We have a note on file regarding Box 19. It has been flagged for special handling. Flagged by whom? By the attorney of record for the account holder, Henderson said. Mr. Elliot Grange. My hand tightened around the phone, of course. Mr. Grange has instructed us that no access is to be granted to anyone without his direct physical presence and a court order. Henderson continued. He stated that the contents are part of a sensitive estate dispute. I see, I said, my voice turning into ice. Did Mr. Grange access the box recently? I cannot discuss access logs. Ms. Caldwell. Did he access it after my father's death? I pressed. Because if he did, and he is not the named owner of the box, that would be a violation of banking regulations, would it not? Ms. Caldwell, I really must insist you speak with Mr. Grange. He is the point of contact. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. You have been very helpful. I hung up. I looked down at the scrap of paper, SDB 19. Elliot Grange had flagged the box. He had locked it down. That meant whatever was in there was still in there. Or he had already cleaned it out and flagged it to catch me if I came looking. But the manager's nervousness told me something else. Special handling, that wasn't standard. That was panic. I looked at the lamp again, the scratches on the base, the torn paper. My father hadn't just left me a lamp. He had left me a breadcrumb trail, and he had anticipated exactly what was happening. He knew Elliot would try to seal the records. He knew Mason would try to grab the assets. The lamp was not the gift. The lamp was the bait. My father knew I would take it apart. He knew I was the only one in the family who cared about how things worked, not just how much they were worth. He had hidden the clue in the mechanism, knowing Mason was too lazy to unscrew a base plate and Denise was too worried about her manicure. But someone had tried. Someone had opened it. They had found something. Maybe a decoy? Maybe a different note? I picked up the scrap of paper again, SDB 19. Wait. I looked closer at the ink. The loop of the 9 wasn't closed. It wasn't a 19. It was a 17. SDB 17. My father's handwriting was terrible at the end. I knew that. But I also knew his numbers. He wrote his 7s with a crossbar. But when he was rushed, they looked like 1s or 9s. If Elliot Grange had flagged Box 19, maybe he was looking at the wrong box. Maybe he had seen a different clue. Or maybe he had misread the same bad handwriting I was looking at. I grabbed my laptop. I needed to verify the box numbering system of the bank. But more importantly, I realized that I was not just fighting for a few dollars anymore. I was fighting for the only thing my father had managed to protect from the vultures, the truth. I put the scrap of paper into my wallet. Behind my driver's license, I put the screws back into the lamp, but I didn't tighten them. I left the base loose. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the independent attorney I had found online before I left Phoenix, Lila Hart. Her reviews said she was aggressive. Her website said she specialized in estate fraud. I needed aggressive. I needed someone who could get a court order to open a bank box before Elliot Grange realized he was guarding the wrong door. Lila Hart's office, a voice answered. My name is Nora Caldwell, I said. I need to hire Ms. Hart immediately. I have reason to believe an attorney is currently suppressing evidence in a probate case, and I have the physical proof in my hotel room. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9? I will be there at 8, I said. And tell her to have a subpoena ready. Lila Hart's office was the antithesis of the Grange and Associates mansion, located in a converted warehouse in the Starland district. It was all exposed brick, steel beams, and aggressive lighting. There was no smell of old money or lemon polish here. It smelled of espresso and printer toner. It felt like a place where things got done, not where they got buried. Lila herself was sharp-edged. She was perhaps 40 years old, wearing a suit that was tailored but functional, her hair pulled back in a severe knot. She did not offer me tea. She did not offer me condolences. She pointed to the chair opposite her glass desk and opened a fresh legal pad. "You said on the phone that you have evidence of evidence suppression," Lila said. Her voice was dry, lacking the sugary southern drawl that Elliot Grange used to coat his threats. "That is a serious accusation against a fellow member of the bar. You better be right." "I am not a lawyer," I said, placing my black binder on her desk. "I am a compliance analyst. My job is to find the story inside the numbers, and the story Elliot Grange is telling does not add up." I walked her through the timeline. I kept it clinical. I described the estrangement, the sudden summons, the reading of the will, and the specific bequest of the lamp. I told her about the soft credit inquiry from the predatory lender, Chatham Coastal Holdings, and the $142,000 balloon payment due on the family company. Lila listened without interrupting. She took notes in a shorthand that looked like cipher. When I mentioned the lamp and the hidden compartment, she stopped writing. "You have the physical object?" she asked. "In my car," I said. "Along with the scrap of paper I found inside it. It references a safety deposit box. My father signed it, but when I called the bank, they told me the account had been flagged for special handling by Mr. Grange." Lila leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her chin. "Let me ask you a few standard questions. Nora, did your father ever establish a formal trust?" "Not to my knowledge. He always said trusts were for people who didn't trust their family, which, in hindsight, is ironic." "Was there a prenuptial agreement when he married Denise?" "I believe so," I said. "My mother died when I was 12. He married Denise 3 years later. He was protective of his assets back then, but I have never seen the document." "Okay," Lila said. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Here is what I am hearing. You have a wealthy testator who becomes ill. Suddenly, a new will appears, dated within months of his death. This new will disinherits the biological child who is financially independent and literate in favor of a spouse and a stepson who have a documented history of financial dependency. The estate is potentially insolvent due to bad business loans, yet the executor is refusing to show the inventory to the beneficiaries." "That sums it up," I said. "We are looking at 2 potential avenues," Lila said, holding up 2 fingers. "First is undue influence, if your father was medicated, or isolated, or dependent on Denise for care. She could have coerced him into changing the will. That is hard to prove without medical records." "I can get the dates of his prescriptions," I said. "I have already requested a copy of his medical billing history from his insurance provider. As his daughter, I have some access to that." Lila smiled, a quick, sharp expression. "Good. The second avenue is breach of fiduciary duty. Elliot Grange is the executor. He has a legal obligation to be transparent with the beneficiaries. By refusing to show you the will and by blocking your access to information about the safety deposit box, he is failing in that duty. If he is acting to protect Denise and Mason at the expense of the estate's integrity, he can be removed, and he can be disbarred." She opened the binder I had placed on the desk. She flipped through the spreadsheets of the money I had sent over the years. She looked at the log of unanswered calls. "They used you as a piggy bank," she stated. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," I said. "And now they want to use the estate to pay off their debts. I think the safety deposit box contains the original will, or a trust document, something that contradicts the paper Elliot read yesterday. If it is in the box, and Grange has flagged it, he is trying to run out the clock." Lila said, "He wants to get the assets transferred and the house title cleared before you can file an objection." She closed the binder. "I will take the case, but I work on a retainer." "I will write you a check today," I said. "But I have one condition. I want everything in writing, every communication with Grange, every request, every denial. I want a paper trail so thick they choke on it." "I would not do it any other way," Lila said. We spent the next hour drafting the initial demand letter. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression disguised as procedural politeness. We did not accuse them of fraud. Yet, we simply cited the Georgia probate code sections regarding the rights of beneficiaries. We demanded a certified copy of the last will and testament, a full inventory of the estate's assets including all bank accounts and safety deposit boxes, and a complete accounting of all administrative expenses incurred by Grange and Associates. We also added a specific line regarding the safety deposit box. Please provide a complete access log for safety deposit box number 19 at First City Merchants Bank for the 12 months preceding the decedent's death. I decided not to mention the number 17 yet. If Grange was guarding 19, I wanted him to keep guarding 19 while I figured out if 17 was the real target. Lila sent the letter via secure email and courier at 11 in the morning. Now we wait, she said. Usually, guys like Grange take a week to respond. They like to make you sweat. They will claim they are gathering the files or that the secretary is out sick. I left her office and went to a coffee shop across the street. I opened my laptop and logged into my work server, trying to distract myself with some actual compliance work for my firm in Phoenix. But my eyes kept drifting to the email tab. I expected silence. I expected a delay. But at 1:30 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Lila. Subject: FWD. Response to request for documents. Estate of Graham Caldwell. I frowned. 2.5 hours? That was impossible. Lawyers bill by the hour. They do not do anything in 2 hours unless the building is on fire. I opened the email. The response from Elliot Grange was short, too short. Dear Ms. Hart, we are in receipt of your letter regarding Ms. Nora Caldwell. We are surprised that Ms. Caldwell felt the need to involve outside counsel, as we have always intended to be fully transparent. Attached is a summary of the estate assets. Regarding the specific request for bank logs and safety deposit box records, we find these requests to be overly broad and intrusive to the privacy of the surviving spouse. However, in the interest of family harmony and to avoid unnecessary litigation costs, the family is willing to offer Ms. Caldwell a cash settlement of $10,000 in exchange for a waiver of further claims. We believe this matter can be resolved quietly. There is no need for a public spectacle or a prolonged probate process. Please advise your client that dragging this out will only deplete the estate's value. Sincerely, Elliot Grange. I stared at the screen. $10,000, I whispered. They were offering me money. They were offering the piggy bank a payout. I called Lila immediately. You saw it? Lila asked when she picked up. I saw it. He responded in 2 hours. Exactly, Lila said. Her voice was humming with energy. And he offered a settlement before we even filed a formal objection. Nora, lawyers do not offer settlements in the first email unless they are terrified. He called my request intrusive, I said. He is trying to shield the box. He is trying to buy your silence, Lila corrected. He used the phrase, avoid unnecessary litigation costs. That is code for, please do not look under the hood. If the estate was clean, he would have sent me the will and told me to get lost. Instead, he is throwing cash at you to make you go away. He is scared, I said. The realization made me feel cold and sharp, like a scalpel. He is terrified, Lila confirmed. And he made a mistake. He admitted that there are assets he considers private, in probate. There is no privacy for the executor regarding the assets. Everything belongs to the estate. What is our next move? I asked. We decline the offer, Lila said, and we ratchet up the pressure. I am going to file a motion for an emergency hearing to freeze the assets. I am going to argue that the executor is displaying hostility toward a beneficiary and attempting to convert estate assets without proper inventory. That will force him into front of a judge. Do it, I said. But Lila, he didn't send the full will. He only sent a summary of assets. I noticed, she said. He is still hiding the documents. I think I know why, I said. The debt. The balloon payment is due on November 1st. That is 2 weeks away. He needs Mason to have the title to the house so they can refinance or sell it to cover the business loan. If you freeze the assets, then the business defaults, Lila finished the thought, and the house of cards collapses. Freeze it, I said. Freeze it all. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window of the coffee shop at the wet streets of Savannah. They wanted me to be the quiet daughter. They wanted me to take my lamp and my $10,000 and go back to Arizona. They wanted to erase me. But they had made a fatal error. They had assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. They did not understand that in my world. Silence is not submission. Silence is what you do while you are gathering the data. I typed a reply to Lila. Proceed with the motion, and add one more thing to the list of demands. I want to be present when the safety deposit box is drilled. Not just a log. I want to be in the room. I hit send. I was not going to let them settle. I was not going to let them hide. I was going to drag every single receipt into the light, and I was going to watch them squirm when the math finally caught up with them. My phone vibrated against the nightstand at 9:45 in the evening. The screen lit up the dark hotel room, displaying a name I had not seen on an incoming call screen in 3 years. Mason. I stared at it. For a moment, the old instinct kicked in. The childhood reflex that said, pick up. They finally want to talk to you. But I killed that instinct instantly. I reached for my tablet, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. I knew the laws. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and Georgia follows similar statutes regarding recording conversations where you are an active participant. I had double-checked this with Lila Hart before I left her office. I was legal. I was ready. I swiped the green button. Hello, Mason, I said. I did not ask how he was. I did not ask what he wanted. Nora. Mason's voice came through, slightly distorted, as if he was on a bad speakerphone connection. He sounded breathless, like he had been pacing. Hey, look, I know things were tense yesterday at the reading. I wanted to call and smooth things over. Smooth things over, I repeated. Is that what we are doing? Yeah, look, he continued, his tone shifting into that cajoling, used car salesman pitch he used when he wanted to borrow money. Denise, and I were talking. We feel bad about how it went down. Dad's will is Dad's will, right? We can't change what the old man wanted, but we don't want you walking away feeling empty-handed. I am not empty-handed, I said, looking at the dismantled lamp on the desk. I have a lamp. Right, the lamp. Mason gave a nervous chuckle. Classic Dad. Look, Nora, we want to make you a fair offer. We are willing to cut you a check for $20,000. That is double what Elliot offered in the email. $20,000, cash. We can wire it to your account in Phoenix by tomorrow morning. I sat up on the edge of the bed. $20,000. To them, that probably seemed like a fortune to toss at the poor relation. To me, it was a red flag the size of a billboard. Why? I asked. What do you mean? Why? Because we are family. Because we want you to be happy. Mason, I said, keeping my voice flat. You have not called me on my birthday since 2018. You did not call me when I was in the hospital for appendix surgery. You did not call me when Dad got sick. Suddenly, you want to give me $20,000 because you care about my happiness? I work in compliance. Mason, I need a better reason than that. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint murmur of Denise in the background. We just want to wrap this up, Mason said, his voice tightening. We don't want the lawyers eating up the whole estate with fees. You know how they are. Lila Hart is expensive. Nora, we are trying to save you money. All you have to do is sign a standard waiver releasing the estate from further claims and acknowledging the will is valid. That is it. Easy money. If the will is valid, I said slowly, laying the trap, and I was only left a lamp, then I have no claim to the estate assets anyway. So why do you need my signature? Well, Mason stammered. It is just procedure. Which procedure? I pressed. Which specific statute requires a beneficiary who received their full bequest to sign a waiver for the other assets? It is for the bank, Mason snapped, his patience fraying. The bank requires all heirs to sign off before they will finalize the accounts. The bank, I said. You mean the bank that holds the mortgage on the house? Or the bank that holds the business loans for Southern Marsh Ventures? No, wait. Mason stopped. He realized he had said too much. It is just a formality. Nora, stop acting like a forensic accountant and just be a sister for once. I am acting like a forensic accountant because you are acting like a desperate debtor, I said. You need my signature because you are trying to refinance the property, aren't you? You can't get a new loan or modify the existing one with a pending probate dispute. The bank sees the potential for litigation, and they froze you out. That is not... Give me the phone. It was Denise. She must have snatched the device from Mason's hand because the audio quality shifted abruptly. Her voice was shrill, trembling with an indignation that felt rehearsed. Nora Caldwell, she hissed. How dare you? Your father is barely cold in the ground and you are harassing your brother about loans. I am not harassing anyone. Denise, you called me. We are trying to be generous, she shouted. Graham wanted you to have peace. He wanted you to move on. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to destroy this family? I am not destroying the family, I said. I am auditing it. You are ungrateful, Denise spat. We took care of him. We were here every day while you were off in Arizona living your selfish little life. You think you deserve a piece of this house? You abandoned us. That word, abandoned. Something inside me, usually locked behind a wall of spreadsheets and logic, finally snapped. It did not make me scream. It made me incredibly, dangerously calm. Let us talk about abandonment, Denise, I said, since we are discussing the timeline. What? October 14th, 2019, I said. You emailed me saying the air conditioning unit in the main house had failed and Graham was overheating. You asked for $4,000. I sent it within an hour. I have the receipt. I later found out the AC was under warranty, and you used the money to buy a designer handbag collection. Did you think I wouldn't notice the Instagram photos? Silence on the other end. February 3rd, 2021. I continued, my voice relentless. Mason got a DUI. You called me at 2 a.m, crying, saying he would go to jail if we didn't get a specific lawyer. I wired $7,500 for the retainer. Mason never said thank you. You never paid me back. That was July, I interrupted her. July of last year. You said Dad's business needed a bridge loan for payroll or the employees would lose their jobs before Christmas. I liquidated a bond. I sent $15,000. I have the wire confirmation code. I have the email where you promised to pay it back in 90 days. That was over a year ago. Not a single cent has been returned. I took a breath. I have calculated the total, Denise, including interest calculated at the lowest federal rate. You and Mason have extracted $53,400 from me in the last 5 years, and in exchange, I got a lamp. It is not about the money, Denise screamed. It is about family. We needed help. I needed a family, I said, my voice rising just a fraction. I sat by the phone on Christmas. I sat by the phone on my graduation. I sent gifts. I sent cards. I was the one who was abandoned. Denise, you didn't look at me as a daughter. You looked at me as an ATM that didn't charge transaction fees. And now that the ATM has stopped dispensing cash and started asking for receipts, you are panicked. There was a heavy silence on the line. Then, Denise's voice changed. The shrill anger evaporated, replaced by something far colder, something venomous and true. Well, she said softly, it is not like you need the money, is it, Nora? Excuse me? You are 35, she said. You are alone. You don't have a husband. You don't have children. You have nobody to leave anything to. Mason has a future. He might have a family one day. This estate is for the future generations. What do you need it for? To buy more pantsuits? To sit alone in your apartment? The cruelty of it took my breath away for a second. It was the naked truth of how she saw me, to her. My life had no value because it did not serve her biology. My success was irrelevant. My independence was a waste, because I was not a mother. I was not a person worthy of inheritance. I was just a resource to be consumed by the real family. It hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but the pain clarified everything. It burned away the last lingering thread of guilt I felt about hiring a lawyer. "Thank you, Denise," I said. "For what?" she asked, confused by my tone. "For confirming exactly who you are," I said, "and for giving me the motivation I needed. You are right. I don't have children, which means I have plenty of disposable income to pay for a very long, very aggressive legal battle. I can keep this up for years. Can you?" "Nora, wait." Mason's voice came back on, panicked again. "No," I said. "The settlement offer is rejected. The price just went up, and do not call this number again. If you have anything to say to me, you can say it to Lila Hart, and tell Elliot Grange to stop stalling. I want the documents." I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly as I set the phone down. I saved the recording. I named the file Coercion Attempt Mason Denise. I uploaded it to the cloud immediately. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. The city lights of Savannah blurred against the wet glass. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean by their cruelty, but I also felt lighter. They had shown their hand. They were desperate. They needed my signature because the bank was squeezing them. The $142,000 balloon payment was the guillotine hanging over their heads, and they needed the house title clear to stop the blade from falling. And Denise's comment, "You don't have children." She thought that made me weak. She thought that made me purposeless. She was wrong. It made me dangerous. It meant I had nothing to lose. I didn't have to protect a child's inheritance. I didn't have to worry about maintaining family harmony for the sake of grandkids. I was free to burn the whole corrupt structure to the ground if that was what it took to find the truth. I looked at the lamp on the desk. The empty base stared back at me. SDB 17. Tomorrow. I was going to find out what my father really wanted to leave to the daughter he knew would survive on her own. I turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness. But my mind was wide awake. The audit was just beginning. The morning sun in Savannah was deceptively bright, casting long, sharp shadows across the marble floor of First City Merchants Bank. I walked in with Lila Hart, my heels clicking a steady rhythm that sounded like a metronome counting down to a disaster. We were not there to deposit a check. We were there to exhume a secret. Lila had worked a miracle, or rather, she had worked the law. She had obtained a temporary court order granting us access to the access logs and the contents of Safety Deposit Box 19, citing the potential destruction of estate assets. We were escorted into the vault by Mr. Henderson, the branch manager I had spoken to on the phone. He looked pale, sweating slightly around his collar. He knew that when attorneys showed up with subpoenas, bank managers often got caught in the crossfire. The box was long and narrow, made of cold steel. We took it to a private viewing room. Lila set her briefcase on the table and nodded at me. "Open it," she said. I lifted the lid. It was not empty, but it was not full either. There were no stacks of cash. There were no diamonds. There was only a layer of paperwork at the bottom. But before we even touched the contents, Lila pulled out the access log card the bank had provided. "Look at this," she said, sliding the card toward me. I looked at the signatures. For 20 years. The only name on the card was Graham Caldwell. Then, there was a new entry, a second name added to the authorized user list. Denise Caldwell. I looked at the date next to her signature. It was dated January 12th of this year. "January 12th, I said, my voice flat. "I have his medical records on my phone. January 12th was 3 days after he was admitted to the intensive care unit for hypoxia. He was on a ventilator. He was sedated." "Exactly," Lila said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "He was legally incapacitated. He could not have walked into this bank to authorize adding her to the box, which means someone brought the signature card to the hospital, or someone at the bank bent the rules." She glanced meaningfully at the door where Mr. Henderson was waiting outside. "We have them on bank fraud, but let us see what they left behind." We turned our attention to the papers in the box. Most were old deeds, birth certificates, the mundane detritus of a life, but at the very bottom, beneath a stack of expired insurance policies, was a blue folder. I opened it. The title page read, Last Will and Testament of Graham Caldwell. I checked the date. It was from 4 years ago. This is the prior will, I said. The one Elliot Grange never mentioned. I flipped through the pages. It was a completely different document from the one read in the office. In this version, the estate was divided into equal thirds, one for Denise, one for Mason, and one for me. But it was the specific bequest section that made my breath catch in my throat. Item 4. To my daughter, Nora. I leave my vintage banker's desk lamp, along with the contents of Safety Deposit Box 19, which contains the keys and codes necessary to access the family trust. The family trust, I whispered. There was a trust. And the lamp was the designator, Lila said, reading over my shoulder. He explicitly linked the lamp to the box. That is why he left it to you in the new will, too. He couldn't change the habit, or maybe he tried to change the new will to remove the trust, but he left the lamp as a vestige, or maybe he didn't write the new will at all. I finished the thought. Lila pulled a copy of the new will, the one Elliot had finally emailed over that morning, out of her briefcase. She placed it side by side with the old will we had just found. Look at the signatures, she said. On the old will, my father's signature was sharp, angular, confident. The G was a sweeping loop. On the new will, the signature was shaky. It was weak. But more than that, the slant was wrong. My father was left-handed. The slant on the new will leaned to the right, the way a right-handed person writes when they are trying to copy a style. And look at the witnesses. Lila pointed to the bottom of the new will. Witness number 1, Sarah Jenkins. Witness number 2, Robert Miller. Who are they? I asked. I ran them this morning, Lila said. Sarah Jenkins is the receptionist at Grange & Associates. Robert Miller is a contractor who is currently being sued by Southern Marsh Ventures for unfinished work. He is on Mason's payroll. These are not independent witnesses. They are interested parties. So Elliot Grange drafted a new will, or allowed one to be drafted, that disinherited me, removed the trust, gave everything to Mason and Denise, and he used his own employee and a man who owes Mason money to witness it? It is a conspiracy to commit estate fraud, Lila said. And they left the old will in the box because they didn't have the key to this box until Denise fraudulently added herself in January. She probably came in here, took whatever cash or gold was in the box, and didn't bother to read the legal documents at the bottom. She saw will and assumed it was just a copy of the one she already forged. She was sloppy, I said. Greed makes people sloppy. And you are meticulous, Lila said, closing the folder. We have everything we need. The timeline of the signature card proves unauthorized access. The medical records prove incapacity. The old will proves the existence of a trust they tried to bury. And the lamp connects it all. We left the bank with certified copies of everything. The rain had stopped, but the humidity was still suffocating. I felt a cold, hard clarity in my chest. This was not just about getting my share anymore. This was about dismantling a criminal enterprise. Lila didn't waste time. By 2 p.m, she had filed an emergency motion with the probate court. She requested an immediate freeze on all estate assets, a suspension of Elliot Grange's powers as executor, and a forensic accounting of all transfers made from my father's accounts in the 12 months prior to his death. The reaction was almost instantaneous. At 4:30, my phone began to buzz. It was not a call. It was a text message from Mason. What the hell are you doing? The bank just called. They froze the business accounts. You are going to bankrupt us. I did not reply. 2 minutes later, another text. Mom is having a panic attack. I hope you are happy. You are a monster. I took a screenshot. Then came the threat. If you don't drop this by tomorrow morning, I am going to tell everyone. I am calling Aunt Martha, Uncle Bob, everyone. I will tell them you are a greedy vulture who is suing her own grieving mother. I will tell them you abandoned Dad, and now you are back to pick the bones. You will never show your face in this family again. I sat at the desk in my hotel room, looking at the screen. Aunt Martha, Uncle Bob. These were people who hadn't called me in a decade. People who only knew the version of me that Denise had painted. The cold, distant daughter who moved west and forgot where she came from. Mason thought this would scare me. He thought that, like him, I cared about appearances. He thought I was afraid of gossip. He did not understand that an auditor does not care about gossip. An auditor cares about the ledger. I opened my email. I composed a new message. I addressed it to Mason, with a carbon copy to Elliot Grange and Lila Hart. Subject: Preservation of evidence, response to threats. Mason: I am in receipt of your text messages sent between 4:30 and 4:45 this afternoon. They have been logged and saved. Regarding your threat to damage my reputation with extended family members, you are free to tell them whatever story you wish. However, be advised that any statements you make that contradict the documented facts of this legal case will be considered defamation. I will add a count of libel to the pending lawsuit. Furthermore, any attempt to contact me directly from this point forward will be considered harassment. If you have concerns about the freezing of the assets, I suggest you direct them to your attorney, who will need to explain to a judge why a woman named as a co-owner of a safety deposit box was added to the signature card while the primary owner was in a medically induced coma. We have the bank logs, Mason. We have the dates. Govern yourself accordingly. Nora. I hit send. I imagined the scene in that big, decaying house on Abercorn Street. I imagined Mason reading the email on his phone, the blood draining from his face as he realized that his bullying tactics had just become evidence in a court file. I imagined Denise realizing that the soft inquiry on my credit report was the moment they triggered their own destruction. They wanted a fight. They wanted a drama. I was not giving them a drama. I was giving them a deposition. I poured myself a glass of water and sat back in the chair. The lamp was still on the desk, its base reassembled but loose. It wasn't just a lamp anymore. It was the lighthouse that had guided me off the rocks and crashed their ship instead. SDB-19, I said aloud. It turned out the number on the scrap of paper hadn't been 17 after all. It really was 19. My father's handwriting had been shaky. Yes, but his intent had been ironclad. He knew they would steal. He knew they would lie. So he left the truth in a steel box and gave the map to the only person who would bother to read it. I closed my eyes. The battle was far from over. Mason would flail. Elliot Grange would try to maneuver, but the freeze was on. The money was stuck. And without the money, the cracks in their foundation would widen until the whole house came down. I was ready to watch it fall. The Chatham County Probate Court was a study in brown wood paneling, brown benches, brown carpet that smelled of 50 years of floor wax and anxious sweat. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Lila Hart. On the other side of the aisle, the Caldwell faction looked like a portrait of a family beginning to melt under high heat. Mason was wearing a navy suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, and he kept cracking his knuckles. Denise was dressed in black silk, holding a rosary beads that I had never seen her use in 20 years. Elliot Grange sat between them, his posture rigid, his usual oil-slick confidence replaced by the stiff alertness of a man who knows he is walking into a minefield. The presiding judge was practically a local institution. Judge Sterling was a woman in her 70s with eyes that could cut glass and a reputation for having zero tolerance for legal theatrics. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at the motion Lila had filed. We are here on an emergency motion to freeze assets and suspend the powers of the executor, Judge Sterling said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to the back of the room. Ms. Hart, you have made some very serious allegations regarding the conduct of Mr. Grange and the validity of the current will. Proceed. Lila stood up. She did not pace. She did not wave her arms. She simply projected a slide onto the screen set up to the side of the bench. Your Honor, The plaintiff asserts that the safety deposit box number 19 at First City Merchants Bank was accessed fraudulently. Lila began. Exhibit A shows the signature card for the box. As you can see, Denise Caldwell was added as a co-signatory on January 12th of this year. Lila clicked a button. The screen changed to a medical report. On January 12th, the decedent, Graham Caldwell, was in the ICU at St. Joseph's Hospital. He was intubated and under heavy sedation. He was medically incapable of signing a bank card or authorizing a new signatory. We have a sworn affidavit from the attending nurse confirming his condition at the time the bank claims he was present to sign. Judge Sterling turned her gaze to Elliot Grange. Mr. Grange, how do you explain this? Elliot stood up slowly. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell had given verbal instructions to add his wife to the box weeks prior. The paperwork was simply delayed in its execution. It was a clerical catch-up, meant to honor his wishes. A clerical catch-up, Judge Sterling repeated. Is that what we are calling forgery these days? Counselor, you are telling me a bank officer allowed a signature card to be processed without the account holder present? We believe the bank acted in good faith based on prior conversations, Elliot said, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. We will get to the bank's liability later, the judge said. Ms. Hart, continue. Lila nodded. Thank you. Your Honor, this fraudulent access is critical because it speaks to the suppression of the true last will and testament, but the plaintiff also wishes to address the matter of the specific bequest given to Ms. Nora Caldwell. The lamp. Mason let out a short, derisive snort. The judge snapped her head toward him. Mason shrank back into his seat. The lamp, Lila continued, was characterized by the defense as a sentimental keepsake. However, upon review of Mr. Grange's own internal inventory list, which we obtained during discovery, this item was labeled with the code P-key. In estate planning software, this code is often used to designate an item that serves as a physical key or a locator for other assets. Lila held up the photograph of the dismantled lamp base and the scrap of paper with my father's handwriting. The lamp contained the code for the safety deposit box, Lila said. Graham Caldwell did not leave his daughter a piece of old furniture. He left her the map to his actual estate. The fact that the defense attempted to dismiss this item as sentimental, while knowing it was coded as a key, suggests an intentional effort to hide the box's existence from the court. Elliot jumped in. Objection. That is speculation. The code could mean anything. Perhaps it meant personal keepsake. P-key is the industry standard abbreviation for physical key, Lila countered instantly. And considering we found the box number hidden inside it, the interpretation is obvious. Judge Sterling leaned forward. Mr. Grange, did you examine the lamp before giving it to Ms. Caldwell? I did not personally examine every item, Your Honor. So you assigned it an inventory code without looking at it? The judge asked. Elliot remained silent. He was cornered. If he admitted he looked, he admitted he knew about the hidden compartment. If he denied looking, he admitted to negligence in cataloging the estate. But here is the smoking gun, Your Honor, Lila said. She dropped her voice, drawing everyone in. We subpoenaed the full access logs from First City Merchants Bank, not just the signature card, but the entry log. She clicked the remote. A new spreadsheet appeared on the screen. One entry was highlighted in bright yellow. On September 22nd, 4 days after Graham Caldwell passed away, safety deposit box 19 was accessed. The room went deadly quiet. The accessor was not Denise Caldwell, Lila said. It was Mr. Elliot Grange. I watched Denise's face. She went pale. She turned to look at Elliot with wide, horrified eyes. Mason stopped cracking his knuckles and gripped the edge of the table. Mr. Grange used a document listed as an emergency power of attorney to gain access, Lila stated. As the court knows, a power of attorney expires the moment the principal dies. Using it after death to access a bank box is a direct violation of the law. It is theft. Mr. Grange, Judge Sterling's voice was now like ice. Did you enter that box on September 22nd? Elliot looked like he wanted to vomit. Your Honor, I was verifying the contents for the inventory. It was a chaotic time. The family was grieving. I was trying to ensure nothing was lost. You entered a sealed box without a court order, using an expired legal instrument? The judge asked. And then you failed to list the contents of that box in the summary you sent to Ms. Hart? I determined the contents were personal and not relevant to the financial estate. Elliot stammered. You determined? Judge Sterling slammed her hand on the bench. You are the executor, not the king. It is not your job to determine what is relevant. It is your job to list everything. The tension at the defense table finally snapped. He told me it was fine, Denise suddenly shouted, jumping to her feet. He told me he had to get the old papers out before Nora came. Mom, shut up, Mason yelled, grabbing her arm. No! Denise pulled away. She pointed a shaking finger at Elliot. He said Graham made a mistake in the old will and we had to fix it. He said he would handle the box. I didn't know he was breaking the law. I just wanted to save the house. Mrs. Caldwell, sit down, the judge ordered. He made me sign the card, Denise cried, tears streaming down her face. He brought the card to the hospital waiting room and told me if I didn't sign it backdated, the state would take everything. I was scared. Graham was dying. That is a lie, Elliot said, his voice rising. I was acting on the instructions of the client. Mrs. Caldwell explicitly asked me to secure the trust documents. You are the lawyer, Mason shouted at Elliot. You are supposed to know the rules. You told us the lamp was a joke. You told us Nora would never figure it out because she was just a... He stopped. He looked across the aisle at me. I met his eyes. I did not smile. I did not frown. I just looked at him with the cold, hard stare of a creditor looking at a defaulter. Just a what? Mason? I thought, just a girl? Just a wallet? The courtroom was in chaos. The bailiff stepped forward. Judge Sterling hammered her gavel, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. Order, she bellowed. Order in this court. Silence fell, but it was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb crater. I felt a wave of emotion hit me. But it wasn't triumph. It was a deep, aching exhaustion. I looked at Denise, sobbing into her hands. I looked at Mason, red-faced and panicked. I looked at Elliot, whose career was evaporating in real time. They were eating each other. My father's death hadn't brought them together. It had just removed the only thing keeping them from turning into savages, the money. It was all about the money. I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. Sitting in the row behind me was a man in a tweed jacket. It was Uncle Arthur. He was my father's younger brother, a retired history teacher who lived in Charleston. I hadn't seen him in years. I didn't even know he was coming. Lila had found him. She hadn't told me. Your Honor, Lila said, her voice cutting through the silence. We have one witness we would like to call briefly to speak to the decedent's intent regarding Ms. Caldwell. Make it quick, Judge Sterling said, still glaring at the defense table. Uncle Arthur stood up. He walked to the stand. He looked old, but his eyes were clear. He was sworn in. Mr. Caldwell, Lila asked, did your brother, Graham, ever discuss his financial affairs with you? Only once, Arthur said. His voice was soft, raspy. About 6 months ago, he drove up to Charleston. He looked sick. He told me he had made a mess of things. He said he had let the business get too leveraged. Did he mention his children? He did, Arthur said. He looked at Mason. Then he looked at me. He said Mason was a good boy, but he had holes in his pockets. He said Denise liked nice things too much. And Nora? Lila asked. Arthur smiled at me. It was a sad smile. He said Nora was the only one who respected the ink. That was his phrase. Respect the ink. He said if anything ever happened, Nora was the only one he trusted to read the paperwork and do the math. He said, I left her a light so she can find the truth. I bit the inside of my cheek. I would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. I left her a light. The lamp. He knew. He knew he was weak. He knew they were greedy. And he knew I was the only safeguard he had left. "Thank you," Lila said. "No further questions." Elliot Grange did not cross-examine. He was too busy whispering furiously to his own defense attorney, who had just arrived to represent him personally. Judge Sterling took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I have heard enough for today," she said. "The court is issuing a temporary restraining order on all assets of the estate of Graham Caldwell. The accounts are frozen effective immediately. No property is to be sold, transferred, or encumbered." She pointed the gavel at the defense table. "Mr. Grange, you are hereby suspended as executor pending a full inquiry into your conduct. The court will appoint an independent administrator. Furthermore, the contents of Safety Deposit Box 19 are to be sealed and transferred to the custody of the court. Any attempt to access them will result in immediate incarceration." She turned to Mason and Denise. "And regarding the allegations of fraud and forgery," she said, her voice dark, "I am referring the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office. If you knowingly signed a bank card for a comatose man, you better hire criminal defense counsel. We are adjourned." The gavel came down. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. I gathered my files. I picked up the black binder. Mason was staring at the floor. Denise was still weeping. Elliot Grange was packing his briefcase with frantic, jerky movements, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "We did it," Lila whispered to me. "We stopped the sale." "We did more than that," I said. "We broke the lock." I walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. Uncle Arthur was waiting for me near the water fountain. "Nora," he said. "Uncle Arthur," I said. "Thank you for coming." "He was a fool, your father," Arthur said, shaking his head. "He made bad choices, but he knew who you were. He knew you were the strong one." "I don't feel strong," I said honestly. "I just feel tired." "That is what the truth feels like," he said. "Lies are exciting. Truth is just work." I watched him walk away toward the elevators. I adjusted the strap of my bag. I had the lamp base in the trunk of my car. I had the court order in my hand. I walked out of the courthouse alone. I didn't look back at the family I had just destroyed. I looked at the street, at the rain clearing up, at the sun trying to break through the clouds. I had an audit to finish, and for the first time in my life, the numbers were finally starting to balance. The atmosphere inside the vault of First City Merchants Bank was entirely different this time. 2 days ago, it had been a clandestine raid with Lila. Today, it was a sterile, regulated procedure. The air conditioning hummed with a low, aggressive vibration that seemed to scrub the room of any personality. We were not alone. There was a court-appointed administrator, a man named Mr. Davids, who wore a cheap suit and carried a clipboard. There was a videographer standing in the corner, the red light of his camera blinking a steady, unblinking eye. There was the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, who looked even more nauseous than he had during the hearing. And there was Lila, standing next to me like a coiled spring. Elliot Grange was not there. His suspension meant he was barred from the premises. Mason and Denise were nowhere to be seen. It was just us and the law. "Record is rolling," the videographer announced. "Time is 10:14 in the morning. Present are Mr. Davids, Ms. Hart, Ms. Caldwell, and Mr. Henderson. We are opening Safety Deposit Box 19, pursuant to the order of Judge Sterling." Mr. Henderson stepped forward with the master key. Mr. Davids inserted the second key, which had been surrendered by Elliot's office that morning. Click, click. The sound was small, but in the silence of the vault, it sounded like a bone snapping. Mr. Henderson slid the long metal drawer out and placed it on the table. He stepped back, hands raised, showing he was not touching the contents. "Ms. Caldwell," Mr. David said, "you may inventory the contents. Please state each item aloud for the record." I stepped forward. I put on a pair of latex gloves Lila had handed me. My hands were steady. I was in my element. This was an audit. I removed the top layer of documents, the deeds, the insurance policies we had seen before. I read their titles out loud for the camera, but my eyes were fixed on the blue folder at the bottom and something else that I had missed during our hurried first look. Underneath the blue folder containing the old will, there was a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with wax, old-fashioned red wax, stamped with a signet ring I recognized. It was my father's ring. On the front of the envelope, in shaky, sprawling handwriting, were 2 words, "For Nora." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the bank's air conditioning. "Item number 12, I said, my voice unwavering. A sealed manila envelope addressed to Nora Caldwell. "Open it," Mr. David said. I broke the wax seal. It crumbled under my thumb. Inside, there were 3 things: a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper, a typed list of numbers, and a flash drive. I unfolded the letter first. The handwriting was erratic. It started strong but grew weaker toward the bottom of the page, as if the energy was draining out of the writer with every sentence. I recognized the penmanship immediately. It was my father's, but it was stripped of his usual flourishes. This was Graham Caldwell writing in the dark. I read it silently first. "Nora, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if you have found this box, it means you did exactly what I knew you would do. You questioned the narrative. I have made many mistakes. I let my vanity run the business, and I let my guilt run my household. I allowed Mason to remain a child, and I allowed Denise to spend money we did not have because it was easier than fighting her. But I am not blind. I am just tired. In the last few months, since the diagnosis, the atmosphere in this house has changed. They hover, they whisper. Elliot comes over for dinner, and they stop talking when I enter the room. I asked to see the bank statements last week, and Denise told me they were taken care of. I asked Elliot about the trust, and he told me not to worry my pretty head. I know what they are doing. They are waiting for the medication to make me pliable. They are planning to restructure everything. I suspect they will try to replace the will of 2019. I cannot stop them. I am too weak to fight them off physically, and if I make a scene, they will claim I am losing my mind. They have already started telling the doctors that I am confused. So, I am leaving you a signal. I told Arthur years ago that you were the only one who respected the ink. I am leaving you the lamp. Denise hates it. Mason thinks it is trash. They will let you have it because they think it is an insult, but you know better. You know I kept my most important keys in that base. Use the documents in this box. Correct the record. And Nora, I am sorry I didn't say this enough when I was alive. I am proud of you. You were the only one who didn't need me, and that is why you are the only one I can trust to save me. Love, Dad. I lowered the paper. My throat felt tight, as if a hand were squeezing it. I did not cry. Crying would be a waste of the clarity he had just given me. He hadn't abandoned me. He had deployed me. He had realized, too late, that his compliant wife and spoiled son were predators, and he had realized that his distant, cold daughter was actually a weapon he could aim from the grave. "Ms. Caldwell?" Lila asked softly. "It is a letter of intent," I said for the camera, "and a confession of duress." I picked up the second document. It was a list, a detailed, terrifying list. Suspicious transactions, Jan to August. It listed wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. It listed cash withdrawals made by Denise using his debit card while he was at chemotherapy appointments. It listed checks written to consulting services that were endorsed by Elliot Grange's private holding company. My father had been tracking his own theft. He had been auditing them while he was dying. "Item 13, I said. A ledger of unauthorized transactions created by the decedent. Then, I picked up the flash drive. Item 14, a digital storage device. That will need to be analyzed by a forensic IT specialist, Mr. David said, but for now, it is entered into evidence. We finished the inventory. It took another hour. We found the original trust documents, signed 5 years ago. which placed the house and the business into an irrevocable trust with me as the trustee. That was the kill shot. If the house was in a trust, it wasn't part of the probate estate. The new will couldn't touch it. Mason had been celebrating inheriting a house that his father had already locked away in a legal fortress. When we walked out of the bank, the sun was blinding. I felt like I had just emerged from a cave. Lila turned to me on the sidewalk. She looked exhilarated. "Nora, do you understand what we have?" she asked. "We don't just have a probate case anymore. That letter? That list? We have a RICO case. We have conspiracy. We have elder abuse. We have fraud." Graham documented his own victimization. "He knew," I said. I was looking at the traffic passing by on Broughton Street, but I was seeing my father sitting at his desk, weak and dying, unscrewing the base of that lamp to hide the code. He knew they were gaslighting him. "And he played them," Lila said. "He played the senile old man so they would get sloppy. He let them think they were winning so they wouldn't look for the fail-safe. The lamp? It was brilliant. It was the only thing they wouldn't fight for." "It was the Trojan horse," I said. "I am going to draft a supplemental filing," Lila said, checking her watch. "I am going to attach the letter and the ledger. I am going to ask the judge to not just remove Elliot, but to refer him for immediate disbarment, and I'm going to file a motion to evict Mason from the trust property. The house isn't his. It never was." "Do it," I said. "Are you okay?" Lila asked. She touched my arm. "That letter. It was heavy." "I am fine," I said, and I was. I felt a strange, cold peace. "I just need to go back to the hotel and prepare." "Prepare for what? The hearing is in 2 days." "Prepare for the end," I said. I went back to the hotel room. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't order food. I sat at the desk. The lamp was there. I had put it back together, but the screws were still loose. I sat there and looked at it for a long time. For 3 days. I had looked at this object and seen a symbol of my father's neglect. I had seen it as a final slap in the face. Here is some junk for the daughter I don't love. I reached out and touched the cold brass shade. I had been wrong. We had all been wrong. This wasn't a symbol of neglect. It was a symbol of respect. He didn't leave me money because he knew I could make my own. He didn't leave me the house because he knew it was a money pit. He left me the truth. He left me the job. "You were the only one who didn't need me." That was the greatest compliment he could have given me. I picked up my phone. I had one more email to write. Not to Mason, not to Denise. I needed to email my boss in Phoenix and ask for an extension on my leave. Subject: Urgent, extension request. Due to developments in the probate matter, I will need an additional week. The scope of the audit has expanded. I have uncovered significant irregularities that require my personal oversight. I hit send. Then I opened the folder containing the photos of the documents we had just found. I began to organize them. I built a timeline. January 12th, Denise added to box illegally. February 3rd, Mason initiates transfer from business account. March 10th, Elliot drafts the fraudulent will. August 1st, Graham writes the letter and hides the code in the lamp. September 18th, Graham dies. September 22nd, Elliot raids the box but misses the trust document. It was a perfect circle of greed, and they had tightened the noose around their own necks. I looked at the lamp again. The green glass seemed to glow, even though the bulb was off. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "You set the board. Now watch me clear it." I went to bed early that night. I slept deeply, without dreams. I wasn't worried about the next court date. I wasn't worried about Mason's threats or Denise's tears. In my mind, the verdict had already been rendered. The only thing left was the sentencing. The final hearing did not begin with a bang. It began with the shuffling of papers. It was the sound of a fortress being dismantled. Page by page. Judge Sterling sat on the bench, her face unreadable, looking down at the supplemental filing Lila had submitted 48 hours prior. The courtroom felt smaller today. The air was thin. On the defense side, the cracks in the facade were no longer hairline fractures. They were gaping holes. Elliot Grange sat apart from his clients, his own personal defense attorney whispering urgently in his ear. Denise looked shrunken, her silk dress hanging loosely on her frame. Mason stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. Lila stood up. She did not waste time with opening flourishes. She went straight to the timeline. "Your Honor," Lila said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "the evidence we have submitted proves a systematic conspiracy to defraud the estate of Graham Caldwell. We have established that on January 12th, while the decedent was comatose, his signature was forged to add Denise Caldwell to Safety Deposit Box 19. We have established that on September 22nd, 4 days after death, the executor illegally accessed that box to sanitize it." She paused, letting the dates hang in the air. But the most damning piece of evidence was not found in the bank. It was found in the object the defense used to mock my client. Lila held up the photograph of the letter found inside the lamp base. "This is a handwritten letter from Graham Caldwell," Lila said. "In it, he explicitly states his fear that his wife and attorney were conspiring to alter his estate plan. He writes, and I quote, 'They are waiting for the medication to make me pliable.' He identifies the lamp not as a gift, but as a signal." Judge Sterling looked at the defense table. "Mr. Grange, you have read this letter?" Elliot's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, we object to the letter's admissibility. It is hearsay. It cannot be authenticated." "It was found in a sealed box accessed under court supervision," Judge Sterling snapped, "and the handwriting matches the samples provided. Overruled. I want to hear from Mr. Grange." Elliot stood up. He looked tired. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who knows his insurance malpractice policy is about to be maxed out. "Mr. Grange," the judge said, "you claimed you accessed the box to protect the estate, yet this letter suggests you were the very threat the decedent was protecting the estate from. Why did you not list the box in the initial inventory?" "It was an oversight," Elliot said, his voice barely a whisper. "An oversight?" Judge Sterling raised an eyebrow. "You used an emergency power of attorney to open it. That takes effort. That takes intent. You told this court you were acting on the client's wishes. But which client? Mr. Grange? The dead man? Or the widow sitting next to you?" Elliot hesitated. He looked at Denise. Then, the self-preservation instinct kicked in. "I was acting on the instructions of Mrs. Caldwell," Elliot said clearly. "She told me there were embarrassing personal items in the box that needed to be removed before the daughter arrived. She insisted." "You liar!" Denise shrieked. She jumped up, knocking her purse to the floor. "You said we had to hide the trust. You said if Nora found the trust, Mason would lose the house." The courtroom gasped. It was the moment every lawyer dreams of and every defendant fears. The open admission of motive. "Sit down." Mason pulled his mother back into her chair, his face crimson. Lila didn't even smile. She just looked at the judge. "The trust," she repeated. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell." Lila turned to the screen. She displayed the document we had found in the box. "This is the document Mrs. Caldwell was referring to," Lila said. "The Irrevocable Family Trust, established 5 years ago. It places the property at 412 Abercorn Street and the controlling shares of Southern Marsh Ventures into a trust. The trustee is not Denise Caldwell. It is not Mason Caldwell. The trustee is Nora Caldwell." Mason's head snapped up. He looked at the screen, then at me. "That's not true," Mason stammered. "Dad gave me the house. The will. The new will gave me the house." "The new will," Judge Sterling interrupted, her voice cutting like a knife, "purports to distribute assets that were already placed in a trust. Mr. Caldwell, you cannot inherit a house that your father did not legally own in his own name at the time of his death. The house belongs to the trust, and the trust belongs to the trustee." Mason looked like he had been punched in the gut. He slumped back in his chair. The realization washed over him. He wasn't the lord of the manor. He was a squatter. "Furthermore," Judge Sterling continued, turning her gaze to Denise. Mrs. Caldwell, you just admitted in open court that you conspired to hide this document. That is fraud. You also admitted to directing the executor to destroy evidence. I didn't mean, Denise sobbed. I just wanted to keep the family together. Nora doesn't need the house. She lives in Arizona. She has her own money. This court is not a charity, Judge Sterling said. We do not distribute assets based on who needs them. We distribute them based on the law. And the law says you do not get to forge signatures just because you think you deserve a bigger slice of the pie. The judge turned to me. Ms. Caldwell, your counsel indicated you wish to read a portion of the decedent's letter into the record. I stood up. I held the yellow legal paper in my hand. I did not look at my family. I looked at the seal of the state of Georgia on the wall behind the judge. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady. I was not emotional. I was reporting facts. My father wrote, I am leaving you the lamp. Denise hates it. Mason thinks it is trash. But you know better. Use the documents in this box. Correct the record. You were the only one who didn't need me, and that is why you are the only one I can trust to save me. I folded the paper. That is all, Your Honor. The room was silent. Judge Sterling nodded. She adjusted her robe and looked down at her notes. She wrote for a long moment. Then she looked up. The court finds as follows, she announced. First, the last will and testament dated March of this year is declared invalid due to undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, and fraud. The prior will and the accompanying trust documents found in the safety deposit box are hereby recognized as the true and legal governing documents of the estate. Second, Mr. Elliot Grange is removed as executor effective immediately. The court is referring this matter, along with the transcript of today's hearing, to the State Bar of Georgia for disciplinary action. A criminal referral will also be sent to the district attorney regarding the misuse of the power of attorney. Third, regarding the property at 412 Abercorn Street, the title is confirmed to be held by the Caldwell Family Trust. Ms. Nora Caldwell is the sole trustee. Mason Caldwell is ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days. Fourth, regarding the funds misappropriated by Denise Caldwell prior to the decedent's death, the court orders a full forensic accounting. Any funds removed from the decedent's accounts without authorization must be repaid to the estate. A lien will be placed on Mrs. Caldwell's share of any residual assets until this debt is satisfied. She slammed the gavel. This case is closed. The sound of the gavel was final. It was the sound of a ledger balancing. I packed my binder. I did not rush. Across the aisle, the scene was one of total devastation. Elliot Grange was pale, staring at the floor. His career effectively over, Denise was weeping into Mason's shoulder. But Mason wasn't comforting her. He was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred mixed with fear. He stood up and walked toward the aisle. He stopped right in front of me. You happy now? He spat. You kicked us out on the street. Dad would have hated you for this. Dad wrote the plan. Mason, I said calmly. I just followed the instructions. You are cold, he said. You are just a cold, heartless bitch. You got the house. You got the money. I hope it keeps you warm at night. I didn't do this for the house, I said. And I didn't do it for the money. The house is drowning in debt. Mason, the balloon payment is due in 2 weeks. As trustee, my first act will likely be to liquidate it to pay off the loans you and Denise took out. There won't be any profit. His jaw dropped. You are selling it? I am settling the debts, I said. That is what adults do. I looked past him to Denise. She was watching us, her eyes red and swollen. She looked old. The veneer of the society matron was gone. Why? She whispered. We offered you money. Why didn't you just take it and leave? I picked up the cardboard box containing the lamp. It was heavy in my arms. I called the attorney because I wanted the truth. I said to her, not your pity, and definitely not your hush money. I turned my back on them. I walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. My heels clicked on the floor. A steady, rhythmic sound. Click, click, Click. I walked out the double doors and into the lobby. Lila was there, smiling. She held out her hand. "Congratulations, trustee," she said. "Send me the bill," I said, shaking her hand firmly. "I want it paid in full before I leave town." "You are leaving?" "My flight is at 6, I said. "I have a job to do in Phoenix. The trust can be managed remotely." "You are not going to the house? To say goodbye?" "I said goodbye years ago," I said. "The house is just a building. The family is just a biological coincidence. I have what I came for." I patted the box in my arms. I walked out of the courthouse and into the late afternoon sun. The storm had passed completely. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I walked to my rental car and placed the box on the passenger seat. I stripped off the SDB-19 sticker I had placed on it during the inventory. The lamp was ugly. It was old. It was tarnished. But as I looked at it, sitting there in the sun, it gleamed. It wasn't a symbol of my father's neglect anymore. It was a trophy. It was proof that when the world tries to bury you in lies, the only thing that matters is having the courage to dig for the truth. I started the engine. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look back at the city. I put the car in drive and headed for the airport. I had closed the file. The audit was complete. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lila Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed watching Nora take down her greedy family with nothing but a lamp and the law, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little justice in their day.